It's August 1776. Just weeks earlier, the Continental Congress declared independence. Across the new United States, bells rang and crowds cheered. But in New York Harbor, the sound that echoed wasn't celebration. It was the thunder of British cannons. The world's most powerful empire had arrived to crush the rebellion. What followed was the first real test for George Washington and his army, a battle that would nearly end the revolution before it truly began. This is the story of the Battle of Long Island, the largest battle of the entire Revolutionary War, and the moment when America's survival hung by a thread. Setting the stage. After forcing the British out of Boston in March 1776, General George Washington knew the next fight would come at New York City. New York was strategically vital. Its deep harbor could house the British Navy, and its location between New England and the southern colonies made it key to communication and supply routes. Washington arrived in the city in April and began building fortifications around Manhattan and Brooklyn Heights. His army numbered about 20,000 soldiers, but most were poorly trained militia, farmers, tradesmen, and volunteers. The British, on the other hand, were led by General William Howe, a seasoned commander, and his brother Admiral Richard Howe, who commanded the Royal Navy. By July, the Howe brothers had gathered over 400 ships and 32,000 troops off Staten Island, the largest British expeditionary force ever assembled up to that time. To the Americans watching from the shore, the sight of that armada must have been terrifying. It was clear that Britain wasn't sending negotiators. It was sending an army to end the rebellion. The British make their move. On August 22, 1776, under perfect weather, 15,000 British and Hessian troops landed unopposed at Gravesend Bay on the southwestern shore of Long Island, modern-day Brooklyn. They quickly began moving inland. Washington divided his forces. About 10,000 troops stayed in fortified positions on Brooklyn Heights, guarding the approach to Manhattan. Around 5,000 men under Generals John Sullivan, William Alexander, Lord Stirling, and Israel Putnam moved forward to hold the Gowanus Heights, a line of wooded hills protecting the roads that led toward the city. The area had only a few key passes through the hills: Flatbush Pass, Bedford Pass, and Jamaica Pass. Washington believed they were all covered. He was wrong. Local loyalists, colonists who still supported Britain, secretly guided British scouts through Jamaica Pass, which the Americans had left nearly unguarded. That one mistake would cost Washington dearly. The flanking maneuver. On the night of August 26th, General Henry Clinton, General Charles Cornwallis, and General Howe led 10,000 soldiers on a silent march through Jamaica Pass. They moved quickly and quietly, circling behind the American lines under the cover of darkness. By sunrise on August 27th, they emerged behind the American left flank near Bedford. At the same time, the rest of the British Army, including Hessian mercenaries under General Leopold von Heister, launched a frontal assault at Flatbush. The Americans suddenly found themselves trapped in a deadly pincer movement, surrounded from both front and rear. General John Sullivan's troops fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by the Hessians' bayonet charges. Sullivan himself was captured. On the American right, Lord Stirling and about 1,600 men from Maryland and Delaware made a heroic stand near a stone farmhouse that still stands today, the Old Stone House in Brooklyn's Park Slope. Outnumbered 6-1, Stirling's men charged again and again against Cornwallis's forces to buy time for Washington's main army to retreat to Brooklyn Heights. Nearly the entire Maryland regiment was wiped out, but their sacrifice saved thousands. To this day, they're remembered as the Maryland 400, even though about 260 actually fought and died there. A crushing defeat. By midday, the battle was lost. The British had executed their flanking plan perfectly, forcing the Americans back into their fortifications on Brooklyn Heights. The Americans suffered about 2,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or captured. The British lost fewer than 400. For the first time, Washington faced the terrifying prospect that his army and the revolution might not survive the week. Trapped between British ground forces and the Royal Navy in the East River, Washington prepared for a siege. Washington's daring escape. On August 28th, heavy rain and strong winds delayed the British attack. Howe, cautious after the bloody battle at Bunker Hill a year earlier, decided not to storm the American defenses immediately. He believed he could starve Washington out. That hesitation gave Washington a chance. one that would become legendary. On the night of August 29th, Washington ordered a complete evacuation across the East River to Manhattan, using every available boat, fishing vessels, rowboats, anything that would float. His men began ferrying troops, horses, and cannons in total silence. The operation went on all night. By dawn, they still weren't finished, and the British fleet was preparing to move in. Then, as if by divine intervention, a thick fog rolled in over the river, concealing the American withdrawal. When the fog finally lifted late that morning, the British looked across the river, Yaoundé, and found the American camps completely empty. Washington had escaped with 9,000 soldiers, but without losing a single man in the retreat. It was one of the most remarkable and daring evacuations in military history. Aftermath and significance. The Battle of Long Island was technically a British victory. The Americans were defeated and driven from New York. But strategically, it was something else entirely. Washington's escape meant the Continental Army, the only real force keeping the revolution alive, had survived. Over the next few months, Washington's army would be chased across New Jersey, only to strike back brilliantly in surprise attacks at Trenton and Princeton later that winter. The lessons of Long Island changed Washington forever. He realized that the war couldn't be won through conventional European-style battles. Instead, he adopted a new approach, one of attrition, mobility, and patience. As he once said, "We must not, in the manner of the Europeans, risk all on one battle. We must protract the war and exhaust the enemy." The loss at Long Island taught him that victory didn't mean winning every battle. It meant keeping the cause alive. The Battle of Long Island was a story of defeat, but also of resilience. Against impossible odds, Washington's army endured, escaped, and lived to fight again. It marked the moment when the revolution stopped being a hopeful idea and became a brutal fight for survival. The fog over the East River didn't just hide an army that night. It concealed the fragile spark of a nation that refused to die. And from that fog, the United States began to emerge. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Revolutionary War history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from America's fight for freedom. What battle should we cover next? Saratoga, Trenton, or Yorktown? Let us know in the comments below.